Hey everybody, what's going on? It's James back here on the VC on the internet, and I wanted to talk about some music books today. It just kind of came to me. I've read a few books. I've completed a few books recently, which is rare for me because it usually takes me months to actually finish a book. So I thought I'd just show some books I've read recently and show some other things that I've read over the last 3-5 years and just share some ideas. Be fun. The first one is this one. It's called Nina Simone's Gum by Warren Ellis. A dear friend of me, he just sent this to me out of the blue. I just had a package one day, and here it is. Friend who sent it to me, he's probably the nicest guy in the universe. Very interesting book. Warren Ellis is the author. I didn't know anything about Warren Ellis. He was in the band The Dirty Three, and he's also has played with Nick Cave for about 20 years. It's called Nina Simone's Gum because in 1999, Warren Ellis saw a Nina Simone show in London. And when Nina Simone walked on stage and sat down at her piano, she took a piece of gum out of her mouth, put it down. And Warren Ellis, he's a weird guy. He had in his mind that he was going to get that piece of gum. So after the show, he goes on stage, he snags that piece of gum, he puts it in a towel that was Nina Simone's towel. He puts it in a Tower Records bag, that classic Tower yellow record bag, and he kept this book for 20 years. So that's sort of the anchor of the book, and it's how his life changed and the people he met and the experience he had, all because of this piece of gum. He was paranoid. He'd go on tour and he thought the maid might throw the gum away. His wife might throw it away. He was paranoid that what if people broke into the house and they took the bag. And then this piece of gum ended up in a museum, an exhibition that Nick Cave put together in Copenhagen. But very unique book, very, very good writing. So yeah, if you like to read, I don't know, it's a stupid thing to say, but anyway, Nina Simone's Gum, it's a great book, so I would check it out. Next one I finished recently is the Roger Daltrey autobiography. And I still don't know what the difference is between an autobiography and a memoir, really. Maybe it's semantic. Really good book. Daltrey writes this as if he was talking to you. Very conversational. Any book to me, no matter what it is, it's all about the writing. Any topic, no matter how boring it could be, a great writer is going to bring it out. So anyway, it's it comes from his working class roots. He's very down to earth. He tells stories of growing up in post World War II London, doing whatever he could to make it. He was so determined to make it. And the great thing about this book, from a lot of other books about rock stars especially, he doesn't get into sordid tales. There's no gossip. He's not getting into details about deviant activities and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, he might mention it along the way here and there, like sprinkle it in, but it's just done in passing, and it's almost like sitting down and listening to him in person, telling his story, and will always probably be the greatest frontman in rock and roll, Roger Daltrey. It's called My Story. Next one, this is a cool book, Jap Rock Sampler by Julian Cope, the musician, and the subtitle is How the Post-War Japanese Blew Their Minds on Rock and Roll. I don't necessarily read a lot of straight history books, but one of the things I like about books on music is, obviously I like music, and I'm interested in the stories and the details and the influences and what goes on in the minds of musicians. But I learn a lot about history in general because of this. So music is almost like an entry point into topics for which I never would have been exposed to. So this book is about rock and roll in Japan and how it developed post World War II with a lot of the American soldiers stayed there after the war. A lot of jazz bands were playing, rock bands were playing, and how just that influence spawned the Japanese music industry and a lot of the bands. So that's an interesting precursor to his discussion of a lot of Japanese rock bands that we all know about, specifically Flower Traveling Band, L'Oreals, Denudes, Speed Glue, and Shinaki, Taj Mahal Travelers, Far East Family Band. Julian Cope, he's very, very, very creative writer. it's very rich writing. So yeah, Jap Rock Sampler by Julian Cope. That's a good one. Next one is the biography of Charles Lloyd. And the subtitle of this is A Wild, Blatant Truth. I learned a lot about Charles Lloyd that I didn't know. I mean, there's a lot of missing holes in my understanding of Charles Lloyd. It's part narrative by the writer, who is Joseph Woodard. And then it's sprinkled in with interviews with Charles Lloyd too by the same author. So a lot of the gaps in my knowledge and understanding of Charles Lloyd is filled by reading this. You know, he talks about his growing up, the musical decisions that he made. He really was an individual guy. He wanted to do his own thing and didn't have, he didn't want to compromise. And it talks about his relationship with Chico Hamilton and Eric Dolphy and Gabor Szabo and a bunch of other musicians, and talks about how he couldn't handle the East Coast and just settled in Big Sur, California. And like all the great, especially jazz musicians, he's a true philosopher, very wise man, and he's still putting out great music. So Charles Lloyd is this one. If you like Charles Lloyd, and I pick it up, it's a nice read. It's a nice read for sure. All right, next one is called Chicano Soul, Recording and History of an American Culture by Ruben Molina. So this is what it says it is. It's a history of Chicano Soul. Nice book. There's lots of photos of this scene, things like that. So it covers, but again, like I said about the Japanese book, this is it's essentially a history book too, because it gets into the forces that influenced Chicano culture in America, and specifically it gets into the Chicano Soul scenes in East LA and San Antonio, kind of starting in the 50s. LA with Richie Valens was a kind of cornerstone of that scene, and then San Antonio was a huge Chicano Soul scene. The writing has a little bit to be desired. It's not the greatest. It's not really so lyrical or interesting. It's very fact-based writing, but it's fine. It's a cool book to have. Covers some Latin rock stuff too at the end, like El Chicano and Azteca and some of those bands. So yeah, Chicano Soul is that one. Next one, this is another autobiography, Wayne Kramer from the MC5, The Hard Stuff, and that's subtitled Dope Crime, the MC5 and My Life of Impossibilities. Very stark admission here, very confessional in a way. Talks about growing up in Detroit, the strife, all the blight of that city, everything they were going through, and then the formation of the MC5 and that late 60s, early 70s scene with all the political kind of chaos that was happening. White Panther Party, Black Panther Party, dealing with the authorities, dealing with censorship. So there's a cross-pollination there of cultural forces that were affecting the music scene at the time. I mean, as it always does, but especially then. But Wayne Kramer, really good book. Very, very honest writing too. So yeah, that's a good one. All right, here's an interesting one. Lords of Chaos, and this is the bloody rise of the satanic metal underground. This is about, I think it was in the 90s, there was, in the black metal scene in Europe, especially Norway, there were all these churches were being burnt by the members of these black metal bands. And I'm not really into black metal, but to me this was just a fascinating topic, and I saw it at a used bookstore and I picked it up. Yeah, it's not the greatest book writing style. It's very dense. I got maybe halfway through it, but I was just interested, not so much because of the music, just as someone who's interested in what motivates people and what are the crazy things that people do. It's a cool book to have, I guess. The next dinner party I have, maybe with a bunch of intellectuals, I could pull this off the shelf and want something heady and deep to talk about. Hey, let's talk about church burnings in Norway, man. But yeah, Lords of Chaos is that one. I think there was a documentary about this. Pretty crazy stuff. I mean, there's some brutal murders with some band members. It's pretty heavy. But yeah, Lords of Chaos. There's one. This is a book of essays called by the guy Gerald Major, and it's called The Velvet Lounge on Late Chicago Jazz. I just saw this again because of the title at a used bookstore, and I think that's, I'm not sure, I don't, maybe Fred Anderson or Ari Brown or maybe Ernest Dawkins. It's one of those Chicago guys, and I know one of you is going to just bust me on, I should know this, but anyway, this is a book of essays, Gerald Urban, and here's the little description of it that kind of sets it up. Troubled urban neighborhoods and jazz club havens were the backdrop of Gerald Major's life growing up in 60s and 70s Chicago. The Velvet Lounge, an original hybrid of memoir, biography, and musical description, reflects this history as it pursues a sustained meditation on jazz, along with a probing exploration of race and class and how they define the material and psychic divides of a city. So these are personal essays, but the launching point of these essays is all jazz based. It might be on a particular artist. There's profiles on Sonny Stitt, Sun Ra. I'm forgetting some of the other ones, but it's about his personal essays. Again, using stories about musicians or records or clubs as like kind of a launching point for him to go into his story personally and the issues that he's dealt with living in Chicago, the cultural issues. So interesting book. Gerald Major, Majer, and they're all essays. So that's that kind of personal writing style, which I love. A couple more to go, maybe 3. This is called Bop Apocalypse, Jazz, Race, the Beats, and Drugs. 4 of my favorite things to at least read about and talk about. So it's the intersection of all these things in American history, probably starting in the 20s. Very beautiful writing here. Again, to me, it's all about the writing. It's not so much the topic. You can really just sink into this one. So it covers these things, and it talks about some of the usual characters like Billie Holiday, but a lot of people I didn't know about and a lot of stories I didn't know about who dealt with a lot of just serious bullshit because of our country's attitudes towards race and drugs, especially. Jackie McLean is featured heavily in here too, and this one is by Martin Torgoff. Here he is. Not like it matters so much what he looks like, but it's really a very, very beautifully written, well-researched book. But it's not academic. Sometimes jazz books, especially, could feel like too academic and sanitary, or not sanitary. Sorry, antiseptic. But oh my God. But yeah, it's a very good read, and the intersection of these four things. If you like those things, this one my wife gave me a few months ago. It's called "Do Not Sell at Any Price: The Wild Obsessive Hunt for the World's Rarest 78 RPM Records" by Amanda Petrush. So this is about this writer Amanda. She goes out, and it's all about diehard record junkies, 78 guys who were in the 78s. So she went across the country, interviewed them, did research, and the profiles these guys. And you think you're obsessed about records, or I am, or anybody else. These guys put everyone to shame. The obsessiveness and the mentality of them, it's beyond anything that I think we see on the vinyl community. They really are taking it to a completely another psychic level in terms of their devotion to these records, these artifacts. Really good writing. Again, I know I'm repeating myself again. She goes into a lot of the precursors in American history that laid the foundation for the 78s, and these guys they care so much about keeping it alive. So entertaining, funny, thoughtful read. So it's called "Do Not Sell at Any Price." I think it just came out a few years ago. Amanda There she is. There's the writer, Amanda. All right. A couple more. In Search of the Blues. I really love this book. There's a million books out there on the blues. I have a number of them, but this is one of my favorites. Again, partly dominated because of just the writing itself. It's very, really just enjoyable to read. It's very lyrical, and you can tell the writing, it's very organized and thoughtful. But this book, it's called In Search of the Blues because it's really about dispelling a lot of the myths that we have, that I have, about the blues. You know, what was the motivation of these artists? Where did this music really come from? What were the motivation of the business people behind it? Gets into stories of some of the characters, and I mean real characters who devoted their lives to preserving this music and promoting it well before the British revival of the early 60s. And the writer is Mary Beth Hamilton. Really nice book on the blues. Again, I like just jazz. I've read a lot of books on the blues, and sometimes it's just like a professor wrote the book, and it's just boring as hell. This is entertaining and thought-provoking, and you learn a lot about history and musicians and the blues, and gets into some of the class and race issues of America too. So, In Search of the Blues. And then last, not least, I broke this one out because I think it's funny. This is called Spiritual Jazz. I bought this online maybe over 10 years ago on Dusty Groove. I just sort of threw it in on an order because it was like a slash price, and I thought, hey, I like spiritual jazz. I could read about spiritual jazz. Problem is, I get the book. It's all in Japanese, right? So like here's Gary Bartz, a section on Gary Bartz, but everything's in Japanese here. They have little write-ups on some of his albums. Everything's in Japanese, so I can't read it. But you're like, look, I mean, it's great. Here's Charles Tolliver, Wendell Irvine. Gets into some deep. It's not just the usual suspects here. Michael White, but I can't read it. If you can read Japanese and you like spiritual jazz, I don't know. Go. It's called Jazz Next Standard. When that means anything. But yeah, there's some books. Maybe my reading streak will continue now that I feel like I'm on a little bit of a roll with these last few books. All right, hey, thanks for stopping by. Enjoy. All right, later.